Do you want to make braised beef in red wine with a gorgeous vegetable gravy and crispy potatoes? I know you do. Give me a couple minutes. I'm going to show you how. So in case some of you were wondering how these video shoots go in my kitchen, especially when I'm making beef, well, I'll show you. Okay. It's a dog's life around here. The key to a great beef stew is not necessarily marinating the meat overnight or dry rubbing it. It's actually in how you treat the order of the ingredients that go into the pot. And I actually do my vegetables when I'm taking the meal a little more seriously than most, two different ways. The first, I have a bowl filled here with leeks, garlic, carrots, onions, some parsley ends. Instead of a bay leaf, I have these beautiful cinnamon leaves that I'm going to be using until they run out. But essentially, this bowl here are just aromatics that I'm going to use to cook along with my beef. And then I'm going to start another bowl here with a mirepoix, a very fine dice, brunoise, of all the vegetables that I want that I'll put in towards the end so they have a fresh, vibrant flavor and they don't taste like they've been cooked for 3 hours. The beef, I want to taste like it's cooked for 3 hours. The sauce, I want to taste like it's cooked for 3 hours. The vegetables that go in there, not necessarily. Certain vegetables need to be treated a certain way. Here's the white part of a leek with a little bit of the pale green. I cut the end off. This really is kind of worthless, the root end. And I cut this sort of 6-7 inch length of leek in half. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this straight down the middle. And the reason is I want to have a really nice dice of leek. So by taking out the core in these two halves, I wind up with sheets, right? Flat sheets of the leek. When I do that, I can flatten this out and cut this in long strips. I don't know, something about 1/8 of an inch. And then I can come back at it the other way. But the idea here is then I have a beautiful dice of leek. That's going to go into my bowl. Then I take the two center cores, cut them in half, line them up with some of the other strays, come back at those. I'm going to do the same thing with this onion. Just doing some nice small dice here. And put that to the side. I'm doing the same thing with the celery. I put the tops into my bowl of mirepoix. This is going to go in with the braised beef. Then I'm going to take, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 ribs of celery. Trim the ends off. That'll go into my mirepoix. And then I'm going to take my knife and just cut long strips out of my celery ribs. Again, they don't have to be perfect, right? I just want to make something a little more elegant, and I don't want them to turn into mush. So I'm just going to briefly saute them and then throw them in at the end of the cooking process to quickly cook. I'm going to do the same thing with these carrots that I've washed. I'm going to take this piece of carrot and cut it straight down into planks. And you can see here, I can then take those planks And do the same thing that I did with the celery and leeks. And I'm going to do the same thing with my parsnip. But with a parsnip, you got to peel it. So we're just going to clean this parsnip up. Parsnips, when they're cooked, have a nutty, sweet flavor that I find just works so well in braises. And again, I'm going to do the same thing. Don't try to dice or cut planks out of an 8-inch long parsnip or carrot. Cut it safely by laying it on its side after creating a flat side, and you can make planks really easy that you can cut into batons. And then before a parsnip is cooked, they're really fibrous. So this is the one that I really want to take my time cutting. And by saying that, I mean I just want to make sure I don't rush. So now this bowl that had my leeks in it is now going to get my onions and carrots and parsnips. And this beautiful, sweet mixture is going to be the perfect foil for my beef. What else do I add into this bowl that is going to cook with my beef for 2 hours until it's nice and tender? Well, my lemon shallot seasoning, which has an awful lot of tarragon in it. I'm going to put a tablespoon or 2 of that in. And then this one is going to probably surprise you. This is wild Sicilian oregano. You can use oregano of any kind. I happen to like the wild Greek and the wild Italian varietals. They are available from all kinds of spice shops. And I'm just going to add about a tablespoon in there. It almost has a minty quality to it. It's a really, really beautiful, beautiful blend in terms of flavor with this dish. Last thing I want to add are my mushrooms. And I'm just going to cut them in half. And I'm going to have those big, beautiful, meaty bites of mushroom in there. I'm probably one of those people that always puts way too much veg into his beef braises, but I love it. I mean, just the gravy in the veg is almost as delicious as the meat itself. And all of the juices from those vegetables are underrated, as are the sugars. They add so much dimension to a beef stew. So I just cut these in half, put them into my big bowl. Then my beef. This is a boneless chuck roast from the arm. It's a very inexpensive cut of meat. If I'm making beef stew, I'll cut out some of these fattier pieces, but you know, I'm actually gonna braise this whole. It's such a beautiful one. I have such a nice big muscle there. Rather than cut it into cubes, I'm just gonna brown and braise the whole thing, but I wanna season it really well before I add this to my pot. So that's a nice coating of pepper on there. And then a healthy dose of salt. Obviously, I'm going to season the rest of this at different times. Let's just really rub that in. Let that sit for 10 minutes while our pan preheats and we gather the rest of our ingredients. All right, so I have this big, beautiful carbon steel pot that I got from my friends at Blanc Creatives. It's handmade. Look at this stunning copper lid. I just absolutely love these handmade pots of theirs. And what I'm going to do is there's a medium flame underneath here. I'm going to add just enough oil, sort of coat the inside, because the fat from that beef is going to render in there as well. And when I see this start to smile and ripple and start to get a little bit aromatic, I'm going to start to brown my beef. All right, you can see that this is starting to ripple. Once I spill it evenly, you can see it start to ripple. I can smell the oil getting aromatic. Again, I don't want to burn my meat. I just want to lay it salt and pepper side down. And let that brown. Here's a little tip. You don't have to blacken your beef, but you can smell when it starts to get nicely browned like that. That's absolutely perfect. That is a browned piece of pot roast. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to add my bowl of aromatics and other vegetables. These are just the ends of the vegetables, the garlic, the onions, everything that's going to braise in here with the beef. And then we'll strain that out of the liquid later on. And what I want to do at this point is I just want to make sure, and it's why I added that little extra bit of oil at the beginning. You can see the pan is almost dry because we have those dried herbs in there, and I'm not on too high a heat, so I'm not worried about burning them right now. I just want to get those onions and leeks glassy. And because I have that extra oil in there, it happens almost instantaneously. The beef is giving off its fat. I can smell this whole dish coming together. And then all I want to do is I want to add some tomato paste. I've got a few tablespoons here. That tomato paste, I want to caramelize on the bottom a little bit as well. So just shake that back and forth. I don't need to get overly aggressive. Let the pan and the thermal momentum do the work for me. That tomato paste falls to the bottom and it starts to caramelize almost instantaneously. It's not burning. Just have all of that heat in this pot working in my favor. I'm going to add about a tablespoon, maybe a tablespoon and a half of Dijon mustard. Mustard and tomato with beef is fantastic. Great combination. That's going to start to caramelize as well. But before anything in the pot gets too far away from me, I'm going to add a whole bottle of really nice red wine. I do not add beef broth. I do not add water. And all we're going to do is let this red wine come to a simmer. We'll put the lid on it and we'll let this cook for a couple of hours. All right, we've got a simmer. Put a lid on it, turn down the heat, and let it cook for 2 hours. Here's a great potato dish that I like to serve with this pot roast braised in red wine. These are medium-sized Yukon Gold potatoes. I pulled them out of the bin at the supermarket, so they're all the same size, which is sort of important here, not crucial, but you know. I steamed them until they were just feeling soft and yielding, and just let them cool on the counter for about a half an hour. So they're cooked all the way through, but I haven't busted any skins and they're not overcooked. And what I want to do is I want to gently push down on this wooden board until they flatten and crack. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to repeat with all of them and let them continue to cool. They really just kind of get, I don't know, about 3/4 of an inch thick. You just want to crack them and flatten both sides. And then when they cool the rest of the way, because they're still warm on the inside, those starches are going to help them hold together. And the reason that I do this on a board is I want to make sure I have one side that's perfectly flat. And when I put them on my board, I tend to put that super flat side up. And I love a crispy potato. I don't want to fry them, deep fry them, so I'm going to pan fry them. And they wind up being just a fantastic, and by the way, it's the first one that's broken, and that's okay. We'll just pan fry the pieces, and there you go. Just a whole boatload of these smooshed potatoes that I'm going to pan fry in butter. So we're getting close to the time that we're going to get ready to straighten this incredible beef braise. So I threw a little bit of butter into this saute pan, and I'm just going to lay my mushrooms in first, and I'm going to brown those so I get some real delicious roasted mushroom flavor on my veg. And then I'll add all the rest of my, I guess what I would call my show vegetables. The vegetables that are going to be in the bowl you're gonna eat, right? I had my mirepoix vegetables that I'm using to season my red wine sauce that are braising with the beef. But let's get this bunch of mushrooms caramelized. Just like that. Place them over medium heat. And then we're gonna add all of these wonderful diced vegetables that are gonna look so beautiful in our pot roast, beef braise, whatever you wanna call it. And what I'm really looking for is just a nice golden brown sear on those mushrooms before I start shaking them around in the pan. They'll lose their liquid and I'll add the rest of my veg. And yes, this is one of my spoons from my Ultimate Hand Tool collection that I've partnered with my good friends at Blanc Creative on. You should get these. And now I'm gonna add my veg on top of my mushroom. And we'll just let these sweat over some medium heat. They'll reduce by volume by quite a bit, really just until the onions are glassy is all I need to do. And then they will go into, you can already see they're losing volume in this pan quite substantially. I just want to get a nice sear on them. And I'm going to cook these vegetables in the liquid that the beef is braised in just during the last 20 minutes of cooking time. They don't overcook. So they have beautiful color and they're nice and tender. And when it comes to straining, don't start transferring the meat and everything all over the place. Just use a nice ladle and a bowl fitted with a strainer. And, you know, if a little bit of vegetable doesn't make it out of the old and winds itself up in the new, don't get into analysis paralysis. Keep it simple. So I just place this on my board after 2 hours, find my ladle, and then all I do is just strain the liquid. And what gets left behind is all of that, well, what I call that mirepoix veg, right? And now that I've got all of that out of there, I still have some liquid in here, but there's no solids. All right. Give it a little push. And then watch what happens. So I didn't have to dirty anything else in the process here. And then I'm gonna put this back on the stove, except I'm not gonna put a lid on it. I want that liquid to reduce around the beef. Okay, so the beef is tender, really, really perfect. With the lid off, not gonna cook that much more in terms of to wellness. We're not gonna dry it out either. So now comes the fun part. We dump all of that fabulous veg, the leek, the onion, the mushroom, the carrot, the parsnip in there. And we're gonna let that cook for about 20 minutes. And by that time, the veg will be tender, the sauce will be reduced, and you see how I just transferred the beef to this other pot? You stick a lid on top of it. Oh, there's another little piece of that delicious red wine braise. But all of that vegetable flavor that we just added in there will just deepen, bring up the sweetness in that sauce. Remember, the sauce is rather acidic because it's just red wine and juices from the beef in that first batch of vegetables. So we're gonna reduce this till it's nice and sauce consistency. Then we'll eat. Even on a low flame, I mean, shameless plug for my friends at Blanc Creatives, but oh my gosh, the heat distribution on this pan is just fantastic. And as you can see, as this sauce reduces, it just is almost thickening before your eyes. There's no flour, there's no roux, there's nothing in there. Those are just those beef juices reducing. This is almost ready to go. So while the meat is resting in the hot sauce, I'm going to take my potatoes and we will crisp up a bunch of those in this beautiful pan. Thank you, Tom Colicchio, for sending me this. It is a beauty. And we're just gonna let those brown on both sides and heat through. And then the last thing that I like to do, just push your meat to the side, and I add a couple of knobs of butter. And I just tilt this pan just to give the sauce a little shine, a little elegance. Seasoned it with salt. But for all of you who are wondering why that sauce in the restaurant tastes so good and has that little extra shine, you can literally see it transform just as I tilt it there. Add some fresh parsley. Give it a nice stir. And we're ready to eat. Plating this couldn't be simpler. There's one that fell apart. No matter. Just take 2 potatoes. Obviously, if you're going to be cooking for a crowd, you can fry a lot more than 5. Let's give one person that little piece that fell off there. And you can just separate muscle here. I think it's more interesting to give people pieces of pot roast that they can sort of cut themselves rather than slice it. This is about as perfectly cooked as I could possibly imagine. Lovely and tender, but yet holding together. And I think that's the hallmark of a really great pot roast. You know, just give 4-6 ounces per portion, because the great joy of this is that sauce. And remember what we said before about it's almost as if you just want the sauce to be the dish and the meat is just the extra. Well, that is basically the way this dish looks. Oh my gosh, look at how great this is. And when you've been making beef stew all day long, look who else. Oh yes, everyone. Do you guys want some? Do you guys want some braised beef? Oh boy, that's the problem. Yes, you'll get some. It's the problem with making pot roast. They've been smelling this all day long. Really? Really? Wow. And how delicious is this? Well, I'm not gonna lie. This recipe is a classic, and I make it all the time, and it's pretty darn foolproof. I'll tell you something. This is the beef dish that you want to be making every week this fall and this winter.